Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the episode of Just Say Guay. I'm your host, George Guay. Today, I'm joined by Steve Mears, who is the play-by-play voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Steve, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so how have you been these last few months? I know, hockey had the long shutdown and the restart with the bubble and trying to figure things out with next season. How have you been?
Everything's been good. It's been relaxing, and of course, would rather be doing hockey games and following along with another Penguins season. Under normal circumstances, that's what we'd be doing right now, especially as we record this here on a Saturday in November. It'd be a hockey night in Pittsburgh or somewhere, and it's unfortunate that we're not able to do it, but we're just hoping for January 1st, hoping to get the season underway around that time. And that's the plan that's in place, or at least the soft date that the NHL is hoping for. So, but in the meantime, it's been an entertaining summer of the usual hobbies and trying to stay healthy and wishing that we had hockey back. I was lucky enough to do those few games, even though it was a short-lived postseason for the Penguins. I did some tennis at the U.S. Open with some broadcasts there. So there was definitely some work over the course of those summer months, but definitely looking forward to getting back to some level of normalcy in our NHL season for 2020-21, hopefully, as I said, in January.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that normalcy too. And I think playing in January will definitely be normal as opposed to the summer, as entertaining as that was. So let's backtrack a bit. How did you first get into broadcasting?
Well, I grew up here in Pittsburgh, a lifelong Penguin fan, and just wanted to be like Mike Lang, the Hall of Fame voice of the Penguins. He's my broadcasting idol, and when I was a kid, the Penguins were the best team in hockey. They won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and I just wanted to be like him. I thought it was the greatest job in the world. You get in for free, you get to describe the games, bring it to the people as they're watching on television or listening on radio, and I just thought it was the coolest job in the world. So for as long as I can remember, that's really the job that I always wanted. There was no plan B or C or D, which was kind of foolish, actually. But that's what I wanted to do. And it really just stems from the Penguins being good at that impressionable age. I'm 10, 11 years old when they win the Stanley Cup, the first in franchise history, 91, 92. And then having the greatest announcer, the Hall of Fame voice of Mike Lang. And the fact that he was able to inspire a lot of broadcasters, a lot of people who wanted to be just like him, and to portray that profession as one that can be so rewarding and so much fun. And the way that he did it with his style and his entertainment and his enthusiasm for the game. If you were someone like me who just loved hockey, that's the best seat in the house. So I've thought about that and I've wanted that since I was 10 years old, and I'm very lucky that it worked out.
Yeah, it's definitely worked out well so far. So, in pretty much every dynasty, there's typically the best player in the league plays for that team. I had Tom Brady growing up. What was it like for you with, like you said, you had Mario Lemieux, the best player in the league at the time, arguably playing for the Penguins and establishing a dynasty?
That's right. That was the confluence of events. I mentioned Mike Lang. I mentioned the team being good when I'm at that age of 10 or 11 years old, where a lot of impressions are made very strongly in anyone's life. But all of that and the success of the team and the fact that there's still a team here in Pittsburgh goes back to Mario Lemieux and his drafting in 1984 and his success on the ice, but also off the ice now as the owner of the team. So much of that just centers around him. I've said it many times on various interviews that I don't think you could find an athlete who has meant more to a specific city than what Lemieux has meant to Pittsburgh, not just the accolades on the ice, on the playing field of winning championships and awards and that sort of thing, but keeping the team in Pittsburgh, continuing to own the team in Pittsburgh, saving it multiple times from financial ruin or relocation. And then also just the charitable endeavors that he and his family have done in the city. The list just goes on and on. There are great athletes who have huge impacts on cities and have historically, but I just don't know if you could put that list of Lemieux's accomplishments and his meaning to the city of Pittsburgh I don't know if there's anybody that matched or that is able to match that or surpass that list of things that he's been able to do. Just the fact that he saved the team multiple times, and we have a beautiful arena, and now the Penguins are considered one of the gold standard franchises in not just the NHL but in all of sports. The way that they run their organization, it's a first-class organization. The way they treat their fans, the strength of their fan base, and the success that they've had on the ice with 5 Stanley Cup championships. So much of that goes back to Mario, and not just him. I was so lucky. We had Yager, Larry Murphy, Ron Francis, Tom Barrasso, Kevin Stevens. There were so many wonderful players, and now I get to be around those guys. Bill Bork, Bob Airy, who are now broadcasters, and Jay Caulfield is a part of our telecast. So all of those players who had such integral roles in those teams in 91 and 92 when they won the back-to-back championships, you have to thank all of them. And now I'm very fortunate that I get a chance to work with some of them.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially with Lemieux, how he was able to establish, the franchise and have his own dynasty, and then from a management perspective, win one with Crosby. So you mentioned that that's the job you always wanted. There was no plan B or C. Does it make it a little more extra, the fact that you're from the area as well, and there's a passion behind it?
Yeah, I'd like to think that does come through in our broadcast. At the very least, it's just to have that historical context and the library in my head of experiences as a fan, and knowing the history of the team. That is something I don't think that you can duplicate. You can study up and read, and if I became the voice of the Dallas Stars, then there's no question that I could easily read up on the story, but just the felt experiences and to have that in your memory bank, I think that does come through. And then the other part is just simply, it's in my DNA. I don't apologize for being a Penguin homer. I do always want to give credit where credit is due to the other team, and you certainly want to maintain your status and your perspective as a reporter, which is kind of what every broadcaster is. You're just reporting on what's going on at the game. But at the same time, there's no bigger Penguin fan than me, or Pittsburgh sports fan. I love the Steelers and the Pirates and the Penguins, and I don't apologize for that. So when it's in your DNA, I would like to think that passion comes through on the broadcast just a little bit more. I think it's pretty obvious that it's authentic. I have the jerseys and the childhood posters to prove it, and the hockey cards and everything else. And you just have a greater appreciation when the team does well. The city feels good, and I think it becomes something where you're rooting for the community. And I would like to think that on our broadcast that passion comes through, not just for doing good work and for the team to succeed, but just for the overall community, and just the fact that I love the Penguins.
Yeah, it's definitely a great experience, it seems like. So while you love it so much at home, there's also a road aspect of being a broadcaster. I spoke to Joe Beninati a few months ago and Randy Hahn recently, 2 NHL broadcasters as well, and they said their favorite place to go on the road is Montreal. Do you agree with that, or do you have another different place?
Yep. If you had just asked me, that would have been my answer. I'm not just agreeing with them or just piggybacking off of what they said. I do think it's the best, and it is worth noting, maybe they did, I'm sure they did, that the one of the big reasons is the broadcast vantage point in Montreal is so outstanding. It's right above the ice. You're in a gondola hanging above the ice, and it's not high up. You're close. You're basically on top of the penalty box almost. That's what it feels like. So that goes into it for our side, to be able to see everything, to be right in the action. That means a lot to the play-by-play guy. But it's also the culture, the history, the many banners that are hanging on the rafters, the fact that it's a beautiful city, and the French culture. The people are wonderful. The food is great. The press box food is famous because they have the famous Montreal hot dogs with a flattened bun, and you can get poutine just about anywhere in the city, which is the fries with the gravy on it. I mean, there's so much to love about the city of Montreal, the hockey culture and the hockey history. But also for us as broadcasters, the vantage point is the best, and the atmosphere is great. It's the way the building is constructed. The stands are so steep, they feel like they almost go straight upward. And it feels like you could be in the last row and you still feel like you're on top of the ice. So there are a lot of factors that go into it. I just love the atmosphere. And I always say to hockey fans, if you're going to go see your team on the road, take that road trip, go to Montreal, or fly to Montreal as soon as they open the border if you're in the United States, and we're able to travel a little bit more freely and get back to some degree of normalcy with the way we travel. I say go to Montreal, spend whatever it takes, get a good ticket, and enjoy watching your team on the road and just seeing what a hockey game is like in Montreal, because that's got to be like a sports bucket list type thing. It's like going to Yankee Stadium or Lambeau Field or a Super Bowl or whatever it might be. But seeing hockey in Montreal, given the history of the Canadiens and the history of hockey in that city, I think if you're a sports fan, you got to go.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list. I definitely got to get up there. Definitely worth the trip. My whole dad's side of the family is from Quebec, and can't say enough good things about Montreal. So getting to the Penguins this year, obviously we had the shutdown. They had a good season up until then. Were you worried about the team going into the bubble? Because I think Pittsburgh personally is the hardest place to win on the road in the Eastern Conference, and there was no home ice advantage. Was that something that you were worried about?
Not so much about the home ice advantage, just because I thought the playing field was equal for everybody. Everyone had to deal with the same obstacles and the same rink and the same ice conditions. So I thought the playing field was equal. I was very optimistic, I got to admit, after watching the team in training camp. I thought with the Penguins being somewhat of an older team, they would have the opportunity with the quarantine and the shutdown to recharge. And after a long season where they had a ton of injuries, I was extremely optimistic that they would be able to just kind of be able to reset. And they look great in the training camp, that abbreviated training camp before the return to play. So I was excited, even though they had to play the extra series as the play-in series, opposed to just jumping right in and having the round robin and then having the standard playoffs. And I knew it was going to be a tough series. Let's not forget about that. We knew a 5-game series against Carey Price was going to be difficult. But I did not expect what happened, where a lot of the same mistakes crept into the Penguins game. They did not look like they had the same energy level that we saw in training camp. Obviously much different going through practices and then going into the Stanley Cup playoffs against a young, hungry team like Montreal. And I wonder about it. I thought we saw a lot of older teams in the return to play. Boston, St. Louis, Washington, Pittsburgh, quote unquote older teams that have won recently, that I thought maybe that just, even if it was subconsciously, that extra drive wasn't there. It just wasn't there. I think that was the case for the Penguins. It was tough. You listen to Tampa and Dallas, the teams that went on long runs. It was tough being in that bubble, even though it's a nice hotel and everything. Being away from your family, though, same kind of routine every day, not really being able to leave that bubble. So that was difficult. And I think with this sport and with that grind of the Stanley Cup playoffs, if you're anything short of fully invested, you're not going to succeed. And I just wonder if some of those older teams, especially the ones who have won recently and have Stanley Cups on their resumes, I wonder if that extra drive was absent and that played a factor. Maybe it's just coincidental. Maybe they just didn't have it and would have lost under any circumstances. But I wonder if that was the factor, especially for some of the teams that had won before.
Yeah, maybe the bubble definitely hit harder on some people than others. Definitely hit hard on Tuukka Rask here in Boston and kind of set the team off for a bit. But what do you like about the team going forward? Because Crosby and Malkin, although they're a bit older, they definitely still can play and contribute at a high level. They did lose Matt Murray. What are your thoughts on just this season and the window that's left between that dynamic duo?
Yeah, it starts with that core. I throw Chris Letang in there. That's the trio that is the Penguins core that has been there for the 3 most recent Stanley Cups in 2009, 2016, and 2017. And they will remain intact here for this year. And I think the management of the Penguins believes in that group still. And I think there's still a lot of great hockey to be played from all those players. And Crosby's Crosby, dealt with injuries this year. But I'll take him on my team any day. Evgeny Malkin had an outstanding season. So I think when you start with those names and what they've accomplished, Chris Letang, too, has been a consistently good defenseman in his career and 3-time Stanley Cup champion. I will take those guys as a core. Even now that they get into their mid-30s, I still think the opportunities and the great hockey is still left with those three players that you're building around. The issue, though, was the supporting cast and a need for the Penguins to get younger and even faster. The reason they won 2016 and 2017, the back-to-back cups, was because they were by far the fastest team in the NHL. It was a brand of hockey that I had hardly ever seen before. I'd never seen a team play that fast. And they used that to their advantage. And especially in 2016, they cruised to a very dominant Stanley Cup win and then repeated it. And it was a little bit harder, but did so in 2017 as well. So I think the mandate was to get younger and to get faster. And Jim Rutherford has done that, adding Kasperi Kapanen. And yeah, you mentioned trading Matt Murray, but they have Tristan Jarry, who had an outstanding year. He was an all-star. And some of the other little moves that they've made along the way, and especially on defense with Mike Matheson, Cody Ceci. I like what I've seen from Jim Rutherford. And just, I think every one of the moves has been with an eye toward youth. And that's the way it's got to go. It's a young man's game now, and it's a speed game. So the Penguins definitely, we knew we're not going to just tear it all down and go with the old-fashioned rebuild and sit through 4 or 5 years of misery. And it might not even take that long nowadays for a rebuild. But with the team and with the players, the core players they have still just early to mid-30s, I think the Penguins realize that they still have an opportunity here with this window. It might be closing, but they still have a chance with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. So it's wise to kind of rebuild on the fly and get younger on the fly, and that's what they've done.
Yeah, it is amazing how they stayed, in the game this long, and there's still some time left with those three and the core. So I got to ask, I recognize Crosby as the greatest player since Wayne Gretzky. I think is an absolute gamer, but personally, I've been an Ovechkin fan my whole life, and a Capitals fan, and I think it's one of my most favorite rivalries in sports, given the history of the two and how long they've kept it going. And I don't think they like each other, but do you think that there's another chapter in that rivalry?
Absolutely, yeah, because I think Washington will still be good. The Penguins will still be good. I'm sure they still have at least one, maybe more playoff matchups left, and that's where you build any type of a rivalry is the postseason. So I still think that we've got a lot of Pens Caps rivalry to build off of, and I'm sure Ovechkin isn't going anywhere from Washington. I know Crosby's not going anywhere from Pittsburgh. So the fact they're in the same division, it's a division playoff format, most likely moving forward. So I certainly think that we're going to see a lot more of those battles between those two. I think there's a healthy respect between the two, especially now with Ovechkin having won a Stanley Cup. I mean, it's two of the greatest players of all time. There's no question about it. I think Crosby has elevated himself to that Mount Rushmore of hockey greats as far as top 5 players of all time to do what he's done in the modern era where it's tough to put up numbers and it's tough to win back-to-back championships and 3 cups and 2 gold medals in his list of accolades. So I think Crosby is on that list of the absolute greatest players of all time, joining Lemieux and Gretzky and Howe and Orr and so forth. And Alex Ovechkin could go down as the greatest goal scorer of all time. I mean, he had his sights set on Wayne Gretzky's record. You hope we don't miss too many games, so he would at least be able to give it a shot here with the shortened season last year and so forth. But there's no question he's also one of the greats of all time. And certainly when it comes to a goal scorer, when I think of the great goal scorers, Mario Lemieux, Mike Bossy, Brett Hull, Wayne Gretzky, and Alex Ovechkin. He is on that list of just pure goal scorers and also just entertaining players to watch. Alex Ovechkin is always going to be on that list as well. You got to give him his due for what he's been able to accomplish. And I love Pens Caps games. They're always fun. Doesn't matter if it's in DC or Pittsburgh. It's always just a tremendous atmosphere and a great matchup. And the two teams have been really good. And the biggest reasons why are Ovechkin and Crosby.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's awesome how they are two of the all-time greats, and they did it in such different ways. So obviously everyone knows Sidney Crosby is a great hockey player, great ambassador for the game as well. But you're around the team a lot. What are some things that people don't see about him that really sticks out?
Well, I always say that he's just as advertised. There's nothing phony about him. He is authentic. what you see in the interviews and some of the media coverage and the charitable endeavors and everything that he does, that's all real. That's him. And he loves hockey. He just loves talking about hockey. And so nothing there is phony. There's nothing about him. He's well raised, comes from a great family, and extremely charitable, extremely polite, and always willing to give you time, especially for someone like me who has a job to do and trying to get some information on the team. So everything is authentic. He is as advertised. It's not an act or a facade that he's putting up, and it's just in the lights of the camera or in front of a microphone, he's acting a certain way and then moves away from the cameras and the microphones and behaves a different way. That's him. That's totally him, is the way that you see him. And the fact that he has been just this great standard bearer for hockey and for the city of Pittsburgh. That's how he is in real life. And there are so many different stories about what he's done. Some of them are public. You can read about some of the things. Is Penguins Learn to Play Hockey program, where he's outfitted who knows how many hundreds of kids, if not thousands of kids, with free hockey equipment and trying to grow the game. His hockey camps in Nova Scotia, and so many other donations and charitable endeavors here in Pittsburgh, many of which don't even get documented or covered in local media, but just he does it out of the goodness of his heart. So he's an impressive individual. It's a pleasure to watch him play just in practice. I enjoy watching what he does in practice and then obviously in the games. But just a perfect example of how you would want someone, if he was your son or just anybody, a friend of yours, he's someone that you'd want to emulate in a lot of ways. So he's been a great role model, and there are so many stories. I think of like all the times where we're on the bus, and I'm usually on the bus pretty early to go to the arena about 5 o'clock to go to the game on the road, and the arena on the road that we're going to be playing at that night. So where I'm on the bus waiting, and the players are filing on, and Crosby's usually the last guy, and he always stops and always signs autographs. Not every player does that. Stops and signs autographs because fans wait outside the hotel. And I remember one time in particular, I think it was 2 seasons ago in Toronto, the bus started to pull away. He had signed a bunch of autographs, but the bus started to pull away, and all of a sudden you hear Sid say, "Oh, hold up." And it turned out there was a young kid with a small Crosby jersey, and he didn't get an autograph. And Sid noticed that, and he just ran up and said, "Hey, just to the team services manager, can you just go grab that kid's jersey?" And there aren't too many players who can make a team bus just stop, full stop, and on the way to the game. And he made the guy just made sure that kid got his jersey, got it signed, and to see that kid's reaction through the window of the bus as I'm watching this all unfold, to see that kid's reaction, it just made his life. This little kid in Toronto, it was really special. That's just one little thing that I will always remember. That he didn't have to do that. He signed a ton of autographs, and he just wanted to make sure he didn't miss the kid. And I think that says a lot about Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, it's really great when someone can be 3 times as better of a person off the ice than they are on, and stories like that. That's really an amazing story. So my last question, I went to Providence College. You can probably see the logo right above me. I was a freshman when Brandon Tanev, who was a senior and also recently acquired Penguin from the Flames, Mark Jankowski, they'll be playing together again. Do you have any thoughts on Brandon Tanev from his first season and then acquiring Mark Jankowski as well?
Yeah, Brandon Tanev was one of the better stories of the past Penguin season. He came in and was highly touted, big contract, one of the longest, the biggest contracts that the Penguins have ever given any free agent. And he lived up to all the hype. He is just a ball of energy. And that was exactly what the Penguins needed. They need a little bit more of that jam and a fast game, an aggressive game. So I loved watching him play. He's got the nickname Turbo. I think that's so appropriate, and just goes all out. So I see why the Penguins were so invested in him and interested in him and getting him here to Pittsburgh, because that's the element that the Penguins were looking for, and they're still looking for more of that. And a guy, as you said, he's won before. You want winners, right? You want guys who maybe they haven't won a Stanley Cup, but won an AHL championship or a college championship in the case of Brandon Tanev. Maybe they won in junior. You want winners. And to have that on his resume, that's pretty big. And same thing with Mark Jankowski, another Providence guy who's always intrigued me. Just the size, the fact that he was a first-round pick. I've always been intrigued by him. I remember when he was drafted and hearing some of the scouting reports, and just for someone to be that big and to also have a lot of background where he's put up some big numbers and hasn't really been able to put it all together quite yet. The NHL, maybe this time here in Pittsburgh, a fresh start with Pittsburgh, maybe that's what he needs. But I'm intrigued by the size, because that's another element that the Penguins don't have much of. They need some size. They traded Nick Bjugstad, who was kind of in that role as a bigger center, and didn't quite work out of a ton of injury issues here with the Pens. But I'm very intrigued by Jankowski and the fit with Pittsburgh. The Penguins are still hoping and looking for that third line center. They've been looking for that third line center for a long time, since the departure of Nick Bonino after the 2017 Stanley Cup. And they've tried different players like Derek Brassard and Jared McCann and a few others have been inserted in there, and it just hasn't worked out. Maybe Mark Jankowski can be that guy. You don't have to be someone who puts up 40 goals. You just have to chip in a little bit. And that brings me to another thing that we're looking forward to and hoping for here in Pittsburgh, and that's bottom six scoring from the forwards, the third and the fourth lines. I think every team's looking for that, but the Penguins more so. They need some of these players to contribute. It feels like we've been saying this for a few years now. They need the third and fourth lines to come up with a big goal every so often. And that was the case in the Cup years and hasn't been the last few. So they need to get a little bit of production. Doesn't have to be 30, 40, 50 goals. Just a little bit of production. Chipping in with a big goal here and there. A timely goal. Not just an energy shift, but putting up a few numbers on the board. And lessen the load on Crosby and Malkin and Gensel and the top end players. So that's what I think the Penguins are hoping for, a little bit more. And they added Colton Sevier, so they're trying to upgrade and change the bottom six. And I think they've done that. It's just a matter of getting some production now, which has been lacking, I think, the last few years for the Penguins. That bottom six, third, fourth line scoring, just chip in with some goals here and there, and then I think the Penguins will be fine.
Yeah, I'm really excited for those two. They created a lot of good special memories for Providence College, and hopefully they do some for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Steve, thanks for coming on my show, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Yep, have a good one.